Ever feel like your phone's listening in? Like it's become an extra appendage? Well, in MT Anderson's feed, that feeling, it's not paranoia, it's reality. We're diving into a world where the internet's been, well, internalized, let's just say. It makes doom scrolling seem quaint.
Quaint and somehow less invasive. We're talking about a constant feed directly into the brain, information overload. That's an understatement. It makes you wonder about free will, about what's even left of a person when every thought, every desire is shaped by this technology.
Right, it's not like picking up your phone, it's like always being on call, except it's your own brain doing the dialing. And that brings us to Titus, our protagonist, living the feed life, blissfully unaware. Or is he?
I think blissfully is debatable. Titus is a product of his environment, which is to say, totally wired, utterly dependent on the feed for, well, everything. There's this scene early on, he tries to think about, I think it's what to eat, and he draws a blank. Can't do it. Needs a prompt from the feed.
It's like his brain's outsourced the simplest decisions, the most basic thoughts.
Precisely. And his friends are no better. Marty, Link, they're all riding the same digital wave. Remember that scene? They're on the moon. For God's sake, the moon.
Talk about a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
And what are they doing? Glued to a feed cast of a football game. Anderson nails that disconnect, the way we can be physically present somewhere amazing, but mentally totally checked out, lost in the digital ether.
It's like, hey, even the moon can be boring if you're not careful. But then there's Violet. She's different. She sees the strings, or at least she senses them.
Even the way Titus describes her, it's like he's struggling against the limitations of the feed's language, trying to find words for something that feels real, something beyond the superficial.
Yeah, it's like he's grasping for a thought, an original thought, and it's kind of painful to watch.
But she recognizes it. There's a scene at the Ricochet Lounge, and you can tell she sees through the shallow attempts by Titus's friends, especially Link.
Oh yeah, Link's attempts at, let's call it courtship. Those were something else. But then things get really interesting with the hack. This isn't just someone stealing data. This is messing with the very essence of who these people are.
And it's telling, isn't it, that Violet's somehow immune. She just found the hacker creepy, so she blocked him. It suggests this awareness, this instinct to protect her own mind that the others have completely lost.
It's like she's got this internal firewall and everyone else is running on default settings.
Exactly. But for Titus and his friends, the hack, it's like yanking the plug out of the Matrix. Suddenly, there's silence. They're alone with their thoughts.
Which is terrifying because they've forgotten how to think.
And that's where we start to see a genuine connection spark between Titus and Violet. It's in that shared vulnerability, in a hospital ward no less, that they actually see each other.
And poor Titus, he keeps asking Violet to aspirate for him.
Because he can't even form the words for what he's feeling.
Yeah.
It's like he needs the feed to tell him how to feel, how to communicate.
It makes you realize just how much we take for granted. A simple conversation, a moment of quiet reflection. These are things that Titus and his friends have lost the capacity for. And it's a slippery slope from there.
It's a chilling thought, and unfortunately, it's only the beginning of their descent. It's almost like a cruel joke, you know?
Correct.
The hack, it fries most people's feeds for, what, a couple of days tops? An inconvenience? But Violet.
It's like she got hit with the digital equivalent of a dirty bomb. The effects are lingering, and they're getting worse.
And it really throws into sharp relief just how deeply embedded this technology is in their lives. It's not just information access, it's her memories, her sense of self. It's all getting fragmented.
Yeah, it makes you think about our relationship with technology, doesn't it? All those photos, all those social media posts, those memories we've essentially outsourced to the cloud. What if that was just gone?
It's like Violet's experience forces us to ask, are we just storing data, or are we storing pieces of ourselves in these devices? And if so, what happens when those pieces go missing?
And the thing is, she knows something's deeply wrong. She tries to disappear, digitally speaking.
That whole trip to the mall with Titus. It's not about shopping, it's about rebellion. She's trying to make herself invisible to the very system that's failing her.
Trying to create this customer profile so messed up, so chaotic that the feed just spits her back out. Like, sorry, can't compute this one.
It's brilliant, really. And then there's that shop, Bebrecker and Carl, and that whole spiel about the cockroaches.
Chilling, right? Like, here's this pristine, curated world the feed usually presents, and then bam, roaches everywhere.
Anderson's really good at dropping those little bombshells, those glimpses of something dark and messy lurking beneath the surface.
And Violet's eating it up. She gets it, you know. But Titus, He's still so plugged in, he doesn't even know what he's missing.
Which leads to some really tense moments, like at Marty's party, when Violet brings up the two-party system.
Oh man, you could practically see Titus's brain short-circuiting.
He can't even process the concept. He's been so conditioned by the feed, by this constant stream of pre-digested information, that anything outside that framework is just dot noise.
And he calls her the propaganda tool. It's almost funny when you think about it.
Talk about missing the point.
Yeah.
But it's also scary because it shows how easily we can be manipulated when we give up our critical thinking skills. And for Violet, this is where things take a turn. It's not just the glitches anymore, it's her body. It's starting to fail.
And you realize this isn't just about a faulty implant. It's about a society that's forgotten how to function without this technology.
They've outsourced their health, their well-being, to this system that's now betraying them. And it's heartbreaking because Violet's trying to tell Titus what's happening. She even tells him about losing a year of memories the year before she got the feed.
And he just doesn't get it. He compares it to rust.
He can't even fathom a life unmediated by technology. The tragedy is he can only understand her experience through the limited lens of the feed itself.
It's like they're speaking two completely different languages. And the saddest part is they're both victims of the same system. But then we meet Violet's father, and it's like a whole other layer of this dystopia gets peeled back.
He's made the choice to exist outside the feed, embracing what he calls dead languages, rejecting this shallow, tech-obsessed culture.
He's like a relic from a forgotten past, reminding us of a time when knowledge, real knowledge, was valued for its own sake, not for its entertainment value or its social currency.
And he highlights the true cost of their dependence on the feed. It's not just about information overload. It's about the erosion of language, of genuine human connection, of everything that makes us human.
And as Violet gets sicker, as her connection to the feed weakens, you can't help but feel the sense of dread. Like, is this where we're headed?
Are we just a software update away from losing ourselves completely? It's a question Anderson doesn't shy away from. And as we'll see, the answer is far from reassuring.
It's tough. Reading this book, you almost have to pace yourself, you know? Because Anderson, he doesn't let up. You're right there with Violet, feeling her slip away.
And it's not a sudden thing. It's this gradual decline. You get the sense that she's fighting, but the system, it's just too ingrained.
And Titus, he just seems so ill-equipped to deal with it.
Well, how could he be? He's a product of this world, just like everyone else. The feed hasn't just shaped how he thinks. It's shaped how he feels, or rather, how he doesn't feel.
Which makes that scene with the up car even more, I don't know, tone deaf. He's showing off this new toy, and she's literally talking about dying.
It's like he's speaking a different language, a language of consumerism and status updates. The irony is, he thinks she's the one who's lost touch.
And she tries to explain to make him understand the severity of what's happening, but it's like...
Bouncing off a wall, it's heartbreaking. She's losing everything, her memories, her sense of self, and he can only relate to it in terms of what, a software glitch.
Which is why she brings him to her house.
Which is like stepping into another world, right? This haven of dead languages and analog technology.
Talk about culture shock. I mean, Titus can barely understand how the door works, let alone follow conversation.
But that's the point. Her father, he represents a connection to something real, something authentic, something the feed has tried to erase.
And you can feel Titus resisting it, you know? He's uncomfortable, out of his element.
Because it forces him to confront the limitations of his own worldview. A worldview that's been curated and controlled by the feed his entire life.
And then there's that list, the things Violet wants to do before she dies. It's such a gut punch because they're such simple things.
Going to the zoo, looking at art, things that most people take for granted, but in this world, they're almost revolutionary acts.
And you just know deep down, it's not going to happen. The tragedy is, they're both trapped. He's trapped by his dependence on the feed, and she's trapped by its malfunction.
And his solution: delete the problem. It's horrific, but also in a way understandable. He can't handle the emotional weight of what's happening, so he does what the feed has taught him to do. He simplifies, he erases, he disconnects.
And that final line about the moon. We went to the moon to have fun, but the moon turned out to completely suck. Man, talk about a mic drop.
It sums up the whole tragedy, doesn't it? The emptiness, the disillusionment, the realization that the feed, for all its promises, can't deliver on the most basic human needs: connection, meaning, purpose. Those have to come from somewhere else.
So where does that leave us? What's the takeaway? Should we all just chuck our phones in the nearest lake and become Neo-Luddites?
I don't think it's about rejecting technology altogether. It's about being aware of its power, its seductive pull, and making conscious choices about how we integrate it into our lives. The Feed in Anderson's novel, it's a cautionary tale, a reminder that the things that make us human, our ability to think critically, to connect deeply, to feel empathy, those things can atrophy if we're not careful. So yeah, maybe put down the phone every once in a while. Look up, look around, engage with the world on your own terms. Don't let the feed, whatever form it takes, dictate your reality.
I think that's a good place to leave it. Food for thought, right? Until next time, keep it real, folks. And for God's sake, read a book.